much. I'm Jerry Keeney, and I am so happy to be able to make connection with my branch of the Harman family. This is the first time ever that I have been to one of these reunions. I grew up 20 miles from here as the crow flies in Bourbon, Missouri. My grandpa Brown, Amos Earl Brown, grew up over in the Marys Valley area, which is the Brown family homestead. And I was privileged 2 years ago, to receive a huge collection of family memorabilia. 15 boxes to be exact, which were shipped to me from South Carolina, where my mother's first cousin lived at the time. She's died since. My mother, Laverna Brown Keeney, lives in Bourbon today at age 100, and she would be here if she were able. She is still living in her own home with a lot of help from my sister and me and a few others, but her mind is good, and she can still get around in her own house and get out for doctor visits and things like that. She really would love to come, she just couldn't. I'm not going to take a lot of your time. I could take the rest of the day. Not because I'm so long-winded, although I sometimes am, but because there's so much in this trove of memorabilia that is so interesting. One of the things I received, and that was entrusted to my care for in perpetuity, until I find some place that it can find a repository after I'm gone, was a book of poems written by Job Harman. How many of you know Job Harman? Everybody here should. He's one of the original Harmans, Job and Catherine. There were two Job Harmans, in fact, maybe more, that came from Virginia. Job Harman and Catherine came about 1860, and they brought with them this woman, my great-grandmother, Emmeline Harman Brown. She was Job and Catherine's oldest child, born in 1859 in Virginia, and by the time she was barely a year old, she was showing up on the U.S. Census, 1860, in this neighborhood. Now, not exactly this neighborhood, but in Hinch. This is William Arthur Brown and Emmeline Harman Brown. How many of you know where Hinch, Missouri is? Camel Bridge, between Bourbon and Anthony's Mill. That's where they apparently first settled. And there were other Harmans in that census, Reuben, Jonas, and one more, maybe the other Job at the time. So, just to orient you a little bit as to what this is and where it came from, there's a preface here that says a little bit about what Job was doing in writing these poems. Job, I hardly knew Job existed before 2 years ago, although I knew there were Harman connections, and it was through Job with my family. But Job was a deeply thoughtful man, and he reflected and he considered what happened to him in life, and he wrote down reflections and feelings and thoughts about what he was experiencing, and those are collected in this journal. This is, the title on the front is Order Book. It's a book of financial accounting, but there's a whole different order of accounting that takes place in this book through the poems that Job wrote. And just to give a little more orientation before I read one or two of these, Job was born in 1837, died in 1919 during the Spanish flu pandemic, although he didn't die of Spanish flu. And Catherine, his wife, was born in Virginia, the year before Job was. They married in 1858, had Emmeline in 59, and by 1860, they were living over at Hint, Missouri. Actually, Harrison Mills is what it was called at the time, because there was an iron smelter established by the Harrison family, among the first settlers in Crawford County, and that's where they settled for a while. Then Job wrote, I don't know how many poems, because there are lots of poems that are not in this collection. I've seen them in newspaper clippings in this collection material. I've seen them in on handwritten sheets of paper in this collection that are not in this book. So he wrote many, many poems. And I've noticed that other Harmans do that as well. There are poems by Will C. Harman, which is predecessor of many. How many of you descend from Will Harman? I see 2 or 3 hands. Does everyone here descend from Job and Catherine? Okay, if you know you descend from Job and Catherine, raise your hand. Does anyone descend from Reuben or, of course, there are different Reubens as well. So I'm just trying to get a feel for who we are and who's here, since I'm just now beginning to get acquainted with the Harman family. But enough said about all that. Job writes in the preface in this order book, and can you all hear me okay? Okay. Am I talking too loud?
No.
Okay. In the preface of this order book, I'm calling it the order book anthology. Anthology is a collection of poems, and that's what this is. In the order book, where you get an accounting of his life. And in the preface, I'll try to read it from his handwriting because it's fairly clear. The following verses were written under a variety of circumstances during a period of 66 years. The end date is 1919, written to the back of the book. He was born in 1837. If we take that 66 literally, he began writing when he was 15 years old or so, because he died at 82. So he began writing about 1852, let's say. They are submitted to all readers upon their merits. They are an expression of the musings of the author as he wrestled with the trials and vicissitudes of life. And however dark the day, however sad the subject, the silver lining of the cloud is presented to the view. Isn't that a wonderful orientation to life? No matter how sad the day or how tragic the circumstances, he's trying to present a silver lining. And that's reflected in the first poem. I was utterly... These poems have emotional hooks in them. And I knew that one or more would hook me as I tried to read these. But the first poem, I wasn't going to try to read it, but I decided I would. Illustrates so well what Job was dealing with. After I read that preface, first time I laid eyes on this order book, I read the preface and I looked at the next page, and the title of the first poem in the book is Lula Harman, Driven into Insanity. Oh my gosh. What is this about? So let me see if I can read it. Where is our Lula gone? Lula, incidentally, was their youngest child. Lula was born in 1878. She died in 1960. I was 16 years old when Lula died. Within 50 miles of where I grew up. I didn't know she existed. So this is about Lula. Sarah Lou was her real name, but she was known in family apparently as Lula. Where is our Lula gone? who was so bright and gay. What evil powers have driven her away? Why was she taken from her childhood happy home, exiled and banished in her mournful doom? I'm going to get the typed version so I can read it better.
You know that's hard to say.
The light doesn't lend itself to reading faded pencil writings. Oh, poor distracted child, 'twas hard to see thee go, so lorn and desolate, so full of grief and woe, doomed to a prison life with strangers all around, in the asylum, and he has quotation marks around that word, our poor Lula is found. And he's talking about the asylum at Farmington. If you grew up in the area, you know, you knew as a child that if you got in trouble, you might be threatened with being sent to Farmington.
That's true.
There, through the weary days and weeks and months and years, must she endure all her loneliness and fears, wondering and pondering, but never knowing why she was cast for strangers to pine away and die. O my bewildered child, for thee our prayers ascend. Have we in heaven no sympathizing friend? Will not the Holy One who rules the earth and sky smile down upon us from his throne on high? How hard it was for thee to be deserted so. No faithful lover to whom thou couldst go, no one to comfort or give a word of cheer, lost and forsaken in a world so drear. Yet we must not despair, for God rules over all. Though great and glorious, he sees a sparrow fall. His ear is open. To our fullest, faintest cry, he will bless his children and their wants supply. Then let us look away from earthly griefs and woes. Things that are temporal are hastening to their close. Over in fatherland is everlasting day, brightness and blessing and delight all the way. Did you catch that silver lining? It may have been in the next life to which he was looking, but the light of that life was informing his life here and now. Now, the poems lighten up a little bit after that first one. And I want to share maybe two more, at least one, in order to see a different tone and tenor of what Job was writing about. I appreciate the worship service you all conducted here. I felt like it was back in my childhood. I was able to sing most of those hymns from memory. So familiar were they, and some of them I hadn't sung since I was a kid in Calvary Baptist in Bourbon, Missouri, where I grew up. One of the comments the pastor made in the message he so wisely shared with us was something about human life being like a mist that appears for a time and then it's gone. Well, guess what? There's truth in that, but there's another truth too. Job's life was a mist that was here for a few years and gone. But it's not gone, is it? Through these lives, sitting here in these pews, at least some of them, Job's spiritual DNA continues to influence the world. And through poems like these, that he probably had no clue someone would be standing up and reading 102 years after he died. Some of them 150 years after he wrote them. So here's Job's influence still being heard, and I appreciate your willingness to listen. This next one seems to have a little bit of comic sense about it. It's called 6 feet. 6 feet by 3 is enough for me. Now, when you hear the dimensions, 6 feet by 3, what do you think of? Grave. Standard grave size, I surmise, is 6 feet by 3 feet. And then however deep you can dig it before you get to bedrock. And have to do a little harder work to go any deeper or just judge a little bit. So, the title of this poem is 6 feet by 3 is enough for me. Whatever my standing in life may be, wise or foolish or bound or free, 6 by 3, enough for me. 6 by 3 for this mortal part, this painful head and aching heart, these tear-dimmed eyes and trembling knees, 6 by 3, enough for me. 6 by 3, just a little spot, there to molder, decay, and rot, and by the living be forgotten. 6 by 3, enough for me. 6 by 3 is all I claim, enough to hold this mortal frame, enough to hide my sin and shame. 6 by 3, enough for me. 6 by 3, friends, do not weep, when I shall with the sleepers sleep, where angels' bands their vigil keep. 6 by 3, enough for me. 6 by 3, in some burying ground. He's lying in the cemetery right out here, by the way. 6 by 3, in some burying ground, with tombstones glistening all around. There you may see my little mound. 6 by 3, enough for me. There's one or two more stanzas. Nay, nay, my soul, lift up thine eyes to the beautiful fields of paradise, to the city of love beyond the skies. All for thee, all for thee. Think of Jesus who died to save, he writes. Think of his victory over the grave. Think of the crown of life he'll give unto thee, unto thee. 6 by 3. 6 by 3 till the judgment day, till heaven and earth shall pass away, and all that are saved gather home to stay. 6 by 3, enough for me. Now, you may be getting hungry and ready to move on, but I'll read one more if I may. Are you up for hearing one more? This is short. And I read it because, again, it gives calm and peaceful touch to where we are and what we're doing, and to Job's experience of this very part of the country. It's called The Wooded Hills. 2 stanzas. Lift up your eyes to the wooded hills, where the oak trees stand and grow, where the raindrops fall and the dew distills, and the winds of heaven blow. Lift up your eyes to the wooded hills. They have a charm for me. My heart for the strange rapture thrills. In the wild woodlands I see. I can almost see Joe walking around in the cemetery taking in the sights of family and friends who are here, remembering where we came from, remembering who we are, remembering what was so freely and generously given, and in some cases sacrificed, that we might be here and living the life that we choose to live in service to the world today. If you have questions or want to see other bits of artifact that I have with me, I've got some old photos and some things. I'm going to put the journal away, though, because it's a bit frail, and I don't want to risk having it come apart. I'm working on a project of transcribing